We're here at the 50th Golden Awards with Don Messick, who is a master of ceremonies. I guess, Don, this is an occasion for you tonight, isn't it?
Well, it certainly is. I feel quite privileged to have been asked to participate in this manner. It's the first one of these that I have attended. And several months ago, when I was asked if I would be the master of ceremonies, I said, well, I seldom do that sort of thing. I'm primarily an actor for whom the lines have been written, and I'm not a stand-up comedian. I don't tell jokes, even though I did used to do a ventriloquist act. But they said, oh, that's fine. We don't want jokes. And then all of a sudden now, in the last few weeks, I've had a flurry of requests to be a master of ceremonies. So maybe I missed my calling.
I guess the word is spreading.
Maybe so.
Yeah. You have been best associated with your work with Hanna-Barbera, and your work especially with Daws Butler. If there were any main people at Hanna-Barbera who did voices, it was yourself and Daws. We just lost Daws. Did you attend his funeral?
Yes, and I was one of the pallbearers. The family asked me if I would.
Was it a difficult an occasion for you to attend?
Well, it was difficult, and yet at the same time, I was happy to do it. I felt that I was doing something for the family, and in a way, it was an honor because of my close friendship and professional, over the years, professional association with Daws.
Daws is a teacher of his craft, and so are you. What have you learned from Daws?
Well, I don't consider myself much of a teacher. I don't teach, but just working with Daws, one couldn't help but learn. I mean, he and I worked so fluidly together, as he used to describe it. It was like musicians improvising jazz. That we could each sense the other's timing and where to pause.
So much of jazz depends on timing, and that timing was with the two of you. I guess the pause sometimes created the humor.
Mm-hmm, exactly. Well, I never sat in or appeared as a guest at any of Dawes's workshops or that sort of thing, even though I was asked many times, and the invitation was already there, primarily because I don't live in the greater Los Angeles area, a few miles up the road in the Santa Barbara area. So I usually do my work and go home. But going back many years ago, it was in 1946, I guess, that I first met Daws, when I first came to Hollywood. And he and I were close buddies from then on, even though later, when I moved to Carmel and commuted from there, and then the last 22 years commuting from Santa Barbara, we had less social contact, but every time we did work together, it was as though we had just seen each other the preceding day. Daws, in fact, is responsible for my getting into cartoon work. He introduced me to Tex Avery, and my very first cartoon, a theatrical cartoon at MGM, was Daws is directly responsible for, and in fact that was my entree into Screen Actors Guild. That's how I got my card. So both Tex Avery and Daws no longer with us, and they leave quite a gap in the industry.
I guess one of the first famous television series for television was the Rough and Ready series. Can you talk about that?
Yes, well, actually that was the first cartoon series that Hanna-Barbera produced when they formed their own company. You see, when I worked for Tex Avery, went out to MGM, I hadn't even met Bill and Joe at that point. And I don't know, it was several years later after that, I believe, that I went out there. I was freelancing again after having worked for about 6 years under contract to Bob Clampett. So suddenly, it's like starting all over again. So I started making the rounds of the cartoon studios. And I went out to MGM having no idea that they were about to fold up their cartoon department. And Bill and Joe were already planning, along with George Sidney, to start their own production company. And so they were interviewing myself and Daws. They asked me if I knew Charlie shows. Of course, I'd worked with Charlie years before on a puppet series. Right. And even after Charlie had left Clampett and formed his own company, we did a series on Channel 4, a puppet show called The Adventures of Patches.
And I was the voice of Patches.
It's a familiar voice, and several of my characters. In fact, that was kind of the voice of Rough and Ready. So Dawes and I were the first voice men for Hanna-Barbera Productions. That was the first series they did. And we did everything.
You did Pixie and Dixie. You did a lot of characters that bounced off of each other, but I think that the very first successful characters that the two of you were famous for was Yogi Bear and Boo Boo Bear.
Yeah, I was Boo Boo.
And Ranger Smith, or Mr. Ranger, as Yogi would call him. Yeah, that was a delightful... It's kind of fun to see these old cartoons on the USA cable network and hear the way we did it back in those days, and they still...
Limited animation, as they call it. The script was still there, the voices were still there, and it really holds its place.
They depended very strongly on the voices, of course, because of the limited animation. And that's where Dawes was a tower of strength because of his strongly etched characterizations. And so for a long time, I was kind of his foil or a second banana, which being in his shadow was a pleasant shadow to be in.
Every cartoon studio has its star. I guess with Fleischer, it was Popeye. With Lance, of course, it was Woody Woodpecker. And with Disney, it was Mickey Mouse. But with Hanna-Barbera, it really was Scooby-Doo. It was the moneymaker.
Well, I suppose so. It took me a while to become a star in my own right, or Scooby-Doo. But that was the longest running in continuous production cartoon series for the network, starting on CBS and then moving over to ABC.
Has it been 17 years or something?
It's, well, by now it would be 18 years.
18 years.
But we produced it for the networks for 16 years. And then last year we did a series of 2-hour movies for television, of which there were several based on Scooby-Doo. And now we are just beginning a new Scooby-Doo series, a pup named Scooby-Doo. And I'm still doing Scooby-Doo.
Scrappy.
Well, Scrappy won't be in this one because he hadn't come along at the time that Scooby was a pup.
I see.
So it's actually Scooby and Shaggy, which of course is played by Casey Kasem, as youngsters. A pup and pre-teenage Shaggy.
You've had a chance to work with many voice artists because, as we know, these casts have a lot of credits. Of all the years of you working with Bill Hanna and Joe Barbera and MGM and Bob Clampett, of all the names, who have you worked with that you feel the favorite affection to? Oh, I know you're close to Dawes.
It's got to be Dawes.
But give me one other than Dawes.
One other. Well,
someone unusual.
I was very fond of Bill Thompson, who also has left the scene. And
it was George Jetson, or who's...
George O'Hanlon did George Jetson.
Okay, I'm confused.
And, well, another person that I've worked with quite a bit over the years and I'm very fond of is Janet Waldo.
Waldo, of course.
And not only, let's see, not only on the Jetsons, of course, but we did a series together at Hanna-Barbera called Precious Pup. And she was Granny Sweet, and I was the...
Is Nancy Weibel involved with it?
No, I don't think so.
That was Harlem Globetrotters.
Yes, that's right. I was on most of those, too, as, let's see... I don't know what character. I think I did a dog. I forgot.
You have such an announcer's voice. Why haven't we heard you more as an announcer? Have you been particularly faithful to Bill Hanna and Joe Barbera through the years?
Well, I don't think it's that, because they're certainly not trying to hold me to any kind of an exclusive contract.
Has there been discussion of replacement of Dawes? And has there been other Dawes, other people doing Dawes' voice? And how do you feel have they been successful?
Not really, but we have just started a new Yogi Bear series for syndication, 45 episodes. And we've recorded around the Yogi character, just myself as Boo Boo and the Ranger, and the other incidental characters. We've done 5 episodes. But now they have selected a voice to replace Dawes. And it turns out that it's one of his students from his workshop, Gary Burson. So we have a session scheduled for next Thursday, I believe it is. And So it'll be difficult working with somebody else. It won't be difficult, I don't mean that. But it'll be strange not to hear the Yogi voice coming out of.
I'm going to mention two directors who you've worked with so much, Art Scott and Alex Lovey. Can you talk briefly, just briefly, about each of them?
Well, both are each, how shall I put it? They are two of the most knowledgeable people in the animation and cartoon field. Art Scott is a delightful person. He has retired now. He worked for Hanna-Barbera for many years, for the probably almost the 30 years or 31 years now that they have been in production. And Alex Lovey, I met him before he joined Hanna-Barbera Productions, when he was still with Walter Lantz, although I didn't really get to know him until later on at HB when he was directing the Scooby shows, and even before that, I think he did some of the Flintstones. Anyway, I know he's going to be in the group tonight that's being honored. Alex is a dear friend, and so is Art. They're both, I love them both. They're wonderful people.
How many years have you been in the motion picture industry? I mean, the animation industry.
Well, as I say, I've been with Hanna-Barbera and have worked for them every year since they formed their own company 31 years ago. And prior to that, I had done a few freelance theatrical cartoon things. So I would say overall it spans about 35 years. That's not including the live television puppet shows.
I guess you have a bit of waiting before your Golden Awards dinner yourself.
Yes, I think that's 14 or 15 years ahead yet.
Before I let you go, can I put you on the spot? If Scooby were here today, what would he think of all of the honorees?
Ah, Scooby, speak for yourself.
Oh, boy. All I want to know is, do I get to go to the table and have a Scooby snack?
He is always hungry.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul.